Hello, everybody joining us here today. I see you all coming in. My name is Peter Weingard with the AMA New York. Welcome. We have a really interesting conversation today with some really great guests. So welcome to our Catalysts for E-commerce series. There'll be more in the series, brought to you by Channel. Please visit us at amanewyork.org to learn about future programming, the rest of this series, both webinar and live events, and there's plenty of other wonderful resources there. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to our panelists and host today. You know, like hardly a day goes by where we don't hear about AI. I mean, just this morning, I was using Wipro's Gen AI tool to write some ad copy. Part of my team was using Adobe Fireworks to correct images, and this is just scratching the surface. So as marketers, AI is really becoming central to everything that we do. We've always been the largest users of technology at companies, and AI is no different. To lead today's discussion is AMA board member Alan Schulman. Alan has spent his entire career working at the intersection of brand storytelling and amazing technology. He's currently the co-founder and managing partner and chief experience officer of Upper Right, and the author of a really interesting Algorithms Don't Feel, People Do in the Harvard Business Review. And we have an esteemed group of guest panelists who he will introduce. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that introduction, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning if you're on the West Coast or if you're overseas. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are, and welcome to Catalysts for E-commerce. This is our signature subject matter series, as Peter said, from the AMA New York, and this is the first of 3 events that we'll be hosting around this topic, with the next one being a live event in New York in late September, and then we'll do another one then again in January. Catalysts for E-commerce, which is our signature subject matter series, is presented by the AMA New York, and our signature series sponsor, as Peter said, Channel. Channel is the commerce acceleration technology behind more than 8,000 retailers who sell online. Channel is an all-in-one, built for e-commerce solution that allows online sellers to centralize their product data and their feeds, and allows you to sell easily across marketplaces like Amazon and eBay, automate your PPC campaigns at faster speed and scale. In short, they make it easy to accelerate commerce and more cost effectively help brands selling online. So we hope you'll check them out at channel.com, and we want to thank Channel for making this possible. And now I just want to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have 1 seasoned e-commerce practitioner, we have 1 commerce venture capitalist funder, and 1 commerce product engineer. So I'd like to start by introducing Kara Schlanger. She's an accomplished global marketing and e-commerce executive. She joined Williams-Sonoma as they began their international expansion. In her previous role as SVP of Global Marketing and E-com at Williams-Sonoma, she was responsible for launching and managing 11 e-commerce websites across Canada, Australia, and the UK, in addition to working with franchise partners at over 20 additional e-commerce sites around the world. Welcome, Kara. Hunter Hartwell is another panelist. He's a partner at Glasswing Ventures. He focuses on investments in artificial intelligence, enabled enterprise software as a service companies, and B2B marketplaces. Hunter has spent the vast majority of his VC career investing in companies that bring emerging technologies and automation to legacy industries, or in this case, in e-commerce, banking, insurance, manufacturing, logistics, HR, marketing, and finance. And finally, we have Cap Sharma. Cap has been in the software industry for over 25 years at both startups and at Microsoft, where Cap worked for about 20 years in the product engineering and other groups. Cap was a member of the incubation teams for many global Microsoft products like SharePoint, Link Teams, Office 365, SQL Azure, SQL, as well as the global ad platform for Bing and other Microsoft products. He has 8 global patents, is impressive, Cap, and he's currently a leader in Wipro's incubation and innovation arm called Lab 45, where he works on generative and other AI, ML, robotics, blockchain, and emerging technologies. Welcome, Hunter. Welcome, Cap. Welcome, Kara. It's great to have you. So I think what we do is I'd love to just start off with each of you giving your just sort of a point of view on before we get into generative AI and its effect on e-commerce. I just want to start with the landscape overall. And let's start with you, Kara. How has e-commerce changed in your view in the last 10 years?
Oh, I think it's changed so much in the last 10 years. I think we were doing e-com with a sledgehammer back, 10 years ago. The first things that come to mind are things we've all been using for a while now in terms of site personalization and site search, things that really drive conversion and move the needle. And I think that this generative AI next evolution is just going to bring all of that to the next level. As I was looking at my bookshelf a little while back and looking back at the old one-to-one marketing books from 20 years ago, and now it's becoming reality. So I think it's a super exciting time.
Awesome. Hunter, what do you think?
From where we sit, I mean, the last really 2 decades have been the wave of AI innovation. I think 2006 is what Glasswing considers to be the main watermark for, or initial watermark, I should say, for the modern AI era that we're all in, given the advent of neural nets that came about around 2006. As far as e-com is concerned and AI in e-com, I think we are now in a place where we've shifted from AI being something that is an enabler to some other business outcome or some other KPI improvement to being, technology for the sake of technology. And I credit, ChatGPT and the work by OpenAI and some of the other foundation model providers for consumerizing AI, because I think it's coming, to the forefront more than it ever has before, or at least in a more, broadly applicable way. So I think we've been investing in AI for close to a decade as a firm, but I think now AI is something that everyone is talking about and practitioners are talking about, as opposed to just executive buyers talking about what AI can do for their businesses, which is fantastic, obviously, for mass adoption.
And Cap, from your perspective, how has it changed over the past 10 years?
I would say, in terms of e-commerce, some of the things that Kara and Hunter obviously pointed out, I would say, one of the big things that's happened is just social media and e-commerce starting to come via social media, the ads and, buying coming there. That's just taken off as, the social media platforms have. The other kind of big one that I'm seeing, which is kind of more newer, is the buyers, especially the younger buyers, are focusing on sustainability, etc. So how sustainable are the things that I'm buying? How sustainable is it to buy, etc.? Where is it sourced and so on, right? So I think in addition to some of the things that were pointed out earlier, those are a couple of key changes in e-commerce that I'm witnessing.
Great. So, Kara, from your perspective, what have you seen out there that's new and actually different? And if that, we know there's a difference between AI and generative AI, and I'll get to Hunter to explain what that's about. But would love for your perspective on what do you see out there that's actually different and in the way that people are selling.
Yeah, I'm seeing a couple of new things, even just in the past, week or two. One that I'll just mention, it's a competitor to my former company is Wayfair, just came out with a new app called Decorify, and that will change that along with virtual try-on, which is, it seems almost ubiquitous now, but quite interesting, where I can upload a room in my house and then start redecorating it based on my preferences and then shop that room. And that's very different from where we were just, months ago in terms of being able to do that. And then you're going to be able to start personalizing much more to me. That's going to start learning about me. It's going to know that the traditional look didn't really work for me, but the bohemian decor does, and that I like blue pillows. So that hyper localization piece of it and the hyper personalization piece of it, I think is super exciting. I think things like, the try-on things are really interesting as well, and how that moves the needle, particularly for the apparel brands, but also in beauty and in skincare. This was mind-blowing to me as I was experiencing. Ulta has a new, without AI, ability to analyze my skin type and customize products to me. So no longer do I have to go into the store to try 300 different creams or whatever. It really is delivering things to me. I think we need to be a little cautious about all of this, right? To say, is that the right thing? Because you still want to build brands, you still want to build awareness of new products, but some of those are super exciting. And then I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later about some of the new platforms and what they're all incorporating.
And Cap, what about you? Anything new you've seen that's very interesting, Kara? I'd love to talk to you more about Shop the Look because I see that evolving very, very quickly. Cap, from your perspective, anything that you've seen or anyone that's doing something really innovative in the space?
I would say along that personalization lines, like Stitch Fix, of course, scanning you, figuring out and then also recommending to you, right? I know, especially for, folks that don't shop that much, somebody that really does smart recommendations is key. Another one I saw, I think it was Yes, they're called Yes, and they just ask you a bunch of questions. What do you like? What do you like to do? What are your hobbies, etc. And then they start recommending products to you. And it's a unique way of sort of that hyper personalization that Kara was talking about, and sort of turning it on its head and sort of figuring out what people like, what groups we put them in. They're just asking you straight out of the bat and recommending, things to you.
Interesting. Hunter, from your perspective, I know you guys have made some investments in AI enabling around commerce, right, and commerce tools. Can you talk about anything that you've seen or that you're excited about from a emerging perspective?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest areas that we've been excited about and remain excited about is enabling practitioners across a lot of different functions, but particularly marketing, to do multiple jobs, whereas they maybe only previously had one. And I think a marketing use case would be, brand managers now have the power to do fairly sophisticated data science at the, power of their desktop, simply because they have access to no code generative tools now that they can ask natural language questions to get answers, whereas previously they would have walked down the hall or sent a Slack message to their data science team. They can just do that themselves now. And I think that in the developer world specifically, they talk a lot about shift left and the ability to take on more responsibility as a developer. I think that's coming to virtually every function now, and marketing, I think, is seeing that probably earlier than most other functions, given some of the creative work that many of the early generative solutions are targeting and focusing on. So I think one of our companies, Narrative, which is a data marketplace company allowing data buyers and sellers to upload, transform their data. They just released their generative AI platform called Rosetta that effectively allows, particularly advertisers and marketers, to query their data availability without actually purchasing the data, which allows you obviously to make more easy and frankly efficient purchasing decisions around what you're going to use moving forward. So I think natural language querying, natural language data science, no code data science is something that's incredibly powerful for all different users.
So, we've known, Hunter, that, declarative drag and drop WYSIWYGs, have gotten more sophisticated. They've gotten more consumer friendly. Now, apparently with generative AI, we're going to be able to create apps on the fly. Can you just, for those who might be on the webinar who don't know the difference between generative AI and AI, can you explain what the difference is there?
Yeah, it's a hotly debated topic. So I'll use some terms that are personal terms or Glasswing terms that may not be industry standard. But I think we view the world as legacy AI, which is such a misnomer in so many ways, is frankly deterministic in nature. You're using an AI system, usually a machine learning algorithm, to query information or to run an analysis with the hopes of getting a predetermined or specific answer, like a inventory recommendation or an ad placement recommendation or CPM that you should be bidding. Those are all very deterministic. There is usually a close to right answer, if not an objective right answer. Generative AI is very interesting and frankly earth-shatteringly amazing in its ability to generate net new content, thus the name generative AI. And I think that's what makes it particularly compelling for marketing and e-com is it's introduced creativity to AI, whereas previously AI was mostly a black and white tool at the disposal of most business leaders and business practitioners. So I think introducing the idea to create things from nothing or to create new derivations from existing content, which is what most generative translation or generative distillation tools are doing, is an incredible capability that we've really never had at our disposal prior to the advent of transformer technology a few years ago.
So Cap, how did he do as a VC guy? You're the engineer.
Yeah.
How was he?
Yeah, as someone coding with these, Hunter did really well. I would say a couple of other key differences is there's a paper, a seminal paper that came out of Google research. It was called actually Attention's All You Need about 5 years ago. And it talked about this next generation of models based on what's called transformers. So most of the newer models, GPT, which is of course generative pre-trained transformer,
Right.
which is obviously based on transformers, they're all the new models are all based on this transformer-based architectures. And so in the underlying sort of technology, that's a huge change. The second is the GPT and other sort of these they're also called large language models. They're, foundationally, they're called large language models and foundation models. They do need like large amounts of data corpus. So for instance, the GPT 3.5 or even 4.0 was trained on 3 years of all of the internet data, right? And they need that data. They're really, really data hungry, whereas some of the older models, you can feed it like a month's data, 2 months data, etc. But the GPT and other LLM models get better once you give it a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, of data. They're also very compute hungry, right? So for instance, some of the numbers we hear about training for GPT 3.5 and then 4.0 is north of 100 million. So there's not a lot of people that can actually do the training for these kinds of models. The capital requirements are fairly high.
Right.
And then finally, they differ from the classical models, as Hunter correctly pointed out, in that they're generative, they're creative. You can obviously create text and have it answer questions, but they can, create images, videos, music, all kinds of things for you. So for those marketers, they can optimize your campaign, run your campaigns, create, materials for you, etc. as well, right?
So it's a little dizzying. I want to get to Kara and talk about fast fashion as we pivot into generative AI now, and now that we've defined it. We know in the e-commerce space, this idea of fast fashion that you'll be able to create a brand, create a look, create a style, virtually allow people to try it on, create it on demand, not house any inventory, go to a POD supplier. Talk to us about where you see the fast fashion movement going.
It's happening. I can't disclose who. I was talking to a former colleague at another company, and they're already doing it. They're already analyzing the data. They're thinking about, as I'm in the cart, what you're going to serve up to me is the upsell of a product that doesn't exist. They're testing it right now. And I think it's super exciting. You're always looking, I was having conversations a while back when, conversion's a little tough. What else can we do in the upsell here? So if it's personalized to me, and that can be fast fashion, Alan, or that can be, that additional home decor product. I just shopped all these things that are in my basket now. And now I'm going to get this beautiful blue pillow because it now knows I love blue. And that's what I'm going to be decorating my house with. So I think there's so many applications, and we're talking about larger companies doing this. I think the really exciting thing is Hunter was just talking about, and I'm working with a few small travel clients right now, is it can be your marketing department and your e-commerce team to take some of that out, and your analytics team. I mean, how many hours have we all spent as marketers trying to stitch together data from disparate sources that we have no time to actually look at it? We got the reports ready for Monday morning. Great. Now what do we do? Now we're actually have time to look at them. So I think that between that of the AI telling us and us knowing more, that's just going to up-level everything that we do.
So are you saying that that'll create more time to make more educated decisions?
Yeah, and I think my opinion on this, and I know there's a lot, and there's some disciplines that are, may disappear, right? Because we can replace some, but I'm hearkening back to the early days of digital design when we think, oh, we don't need art direction anymore. Well, we're still going to need people thinking about and prioritizing and doing and protecting as brand stewards as well. So, I think that's where we're going to be able to see a lot more throughput and a lot more smarter decisions and a lot more creativity. Marketers can be marketers rather than data jockeys. That's exciting to me. I mean, I'm a data jockey as well. You have to be these days, but it gives us a whole new world of possibility.
That's interesting. From your perspective of the storytelling side, that's always sort of, fashion brands have always been somewhat aspirational, right? And so if we're going to be able to sort of create, fast brands, fast fashion, fast everything, what does that mean to brand building?
It does not go away, Alan. I think that if we all, we cannot just become purely transactional. Brands matter. They matter, guys. That relationship matters. That inspiration matters. We know that. This just pushes things into the funnel a little bit more, and frankly, allows people to create that weren't creating before up the funnel. However, don't just walk away and say, "Oh, I've asked my tool to produce all this wonderful ad copy for me," and I walk away from it. We need to be really mindful of what that means in building our brands.
So just a, sort of a question for you, Cap, if like Kara, who comes from Williams-Sonoma, that if ChatGPT knows the voice and tone and manner of that brand, and I insert the brand guidelines into ChatGPT, does that mean it's going to be able to, essentially nail the brand voice and nail the brand tone, and basically be able to, take over the storytelling aspects of the trust that a brand like that has earned?
Yeah, I mean, it can essentially absorb like all of the internet, in a matter of a few days. So obviously you can feed it a corpus of Williams-Sonoma and their associated brands, and the history of it, and what kind of tone they would like, for the current campaigns. But to Kara's point, you can also hyper personalize it. You can also say that, Cap's household, and we're big fans of both Williams-Sonoma and Pottery Barn, for this particular household, we also have all this other data. You can also then give it that data, and you can then generate, you can actually have GPT generate very hyper personalized ads and other content in like the Williams-Sonoma tone for an individual consumer that you might have, right? And then you can do this at scale. So, assuming hundreds of millions or more customers that Williams-Sonoma has, you can actually then generate this at scale. And therefore the power of the marketer, goes up quite a bit, right? So all those creative assets, et cetera, where you need a bunch of people to do and guide them and so on, all of a sudden you're doing it, in an instant using some of these generative AI technologies, right? I mean, and the list goes on and on. You
Right.
can,
Right.
you can actually create influencers that can talk about this, and they can also be hyper personalized, to particular individuals or households that you might be targeting, right? You can do A/B testing and so on. So it's mind-boggling, and we haven't even gotten into like the virtual pieces that you could do with this, right?
Exactly. So, and Hunter, I think you mentioned this earlier before, that the role of marketing and the role of sort of e-com, and or it's sort of a giant measure. What kind of skills do you think are going to be necessary to tell this technology? Is it as simple as drag and drop, declarative, low code, no code, simple WYSIWYG, or am I going to have to really know how to guide it?
I think we're in an interesting in-between phase right now, to be honest with you. And this is a fairly subjective topic in the VC world right now, because people have different opinions on the timeline of evolution here. My opinion is that for the next year, maybe less time than that, maybe slightly more, there will be hard skills in terms of manipulating some of these foundation models that will be useful, and people that master them more quickly will get a leg up in their respective functions. I think obviously the one most people have been talking about is prompt engineering, architecting prompts in a specific way to get desired outputs. Certainly some of the model orchestration, choosing which foundation model you want to use, not only whether you want to use Llama or GPT-4, GPT 3.5, but which of those you want to use. As probably most of the people on the call know, there are different versions of GPT-4 that have different parameters and different optimizations. So I think knowing which of those to use is a useful hard skill. I think the reason people are considering this somewhat of an in-between phase is because just like we had with cloud a decade ago, there are almost certainly going to be fairly large companies built that are the middle layer companies of generative AI that help app developers do all of those things in a fairly no-code, low-code way. And think the Databricks and the MongoDBs of the world in the cloud and the database architecture world, those will come about in the generative AI space and do all of those things for you. Probably again, those will rise in the next year or two. There are already literally hundreds of those companies out there that have raised pre-seed and seed rounds, largely in San Francisco and the Bay Area. But I think it'll take a little while before any one of those really breaks away from the pack and is more broadly usable by the general ecosystem.
So Cap, what are you telling your clients, as sort of a, sort of a hybrid, global SI and consultancy? What are you telling clients who are trying to get smart on, what to do first? Is marketing the first frontier because of the creative tools? Is as we think about commerce enablement, or is it, individual? I mean, this stuff is moving so fast. We could have individual brands popping up super fast. How does an enterprise get smart?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the topic of the day, in Lab 45, which is the part of Wipro where we focus on innovation and incubation. A year ago, we would talk certainly about AI/ML, but a lot of discussions on robotics, drones, metaverse, blockchain, and so on. And now about 9 out of 10 discussions with our global customers are focused on what they can do with generative AI. We're asking customers to think about sort of 2 approaches. One is the horizontal and then layered with the vertical. In the horizontal are areas like marketing, which most, or all large companies have. And then think about the other sort of horizontals: finance, operations, sales, HR. Again, what are areas where you can benefit from Gen AI there, right? I think as we were talking to Peter, who heads up marketing at Wipro, they have a process where they're looking at these documents which are very specific to a particular business line in Wipro. Let's say, financial services. We have something called Capco, and he often gets a document, a 30-pager on, the new technology in credit default swaps, which the marketers don't understand, but they can use generative AI, and they're using our platform to generate a 5-liner on it that they can post on LinkedIn or a post to Twitter. So there's like a horizontal approach, and then based on your industry, whether you're CPG or retail or energy, et cetera, how can Gen AI be applied there? So that's the broad approach, and obviously dip your toes in. And GPT, while it's sort of been this watershed technology that's taken off, there's also Google has the Palm model, as Hunter had pointed out earlier. Facebook recently open sourced Llama 2. So there's different models, and there might be different models which are best at your particular vertical scenario or
Right.
your business scenario. The other key thing that we're pointing out is also to have guardrails. And by those guardrails, you want to make sure that what the generative AI, co-pilots or bots are spitting out isn't, is ethically correct. It's the right thing from your corporate policy standpoint. It doesn't, violate humanity, so to say, of different people and audiences. So having the right kind of guardrails around it, obviously technology guardrails, but also some human in the loop guardrails, especially when you're experimenting or dipping your toes in, is another key thing that we're pointing out to our large customers.
Got it. And Kara, for somebody who's worked in e-com as long as you have, what do you think, if you're consulting for maybe a younger brand or a DTC brand, what are you telling them to plug in at this point? Is it infrastructure? Is it, Adobe Express? What tools are you recommending for your clients?
Yeah, well, I think it's, starting with the things that are going to move the needle the most in terms of an e-commerce perspective. And I think what I love about this series, Alan, is that connection between e-com and marketing has to be tighter than ever. What makes me completely crazy is when you see a digital ad that goes to a landing page where you can't buy the product, right? We've got to get away from that stuff. So this allows the marketers to bring this together. And I think if you're looking at how do you optimize based on, things that move the needle, site search, there's a heap of tools out there. They're getting better and better. That whole chain of advertising through to conversion, all the things, I'm not going to name names of particular tools right now because there's so many out there, and if you want to talk to me separately, please do. But there's so much. I think also for smaller companies that don't have maybe the team that is as large to do the social media and to do everything else, is tools. And I will say, like Jasper, for example, where you can bring everything through here and have consistency in the messaging. But I think to Cap's point, we really have to be, it's not just guardrails, but thinking about customer experience and customer journey. And once we kind of step away from that, then this can go very pear-shaped very quickly. And I think that's the thing that I would advise anybody in either marketing and e-commerce, and that marriage between those two disciplines, to really thinking about that piece for everything that we're creating these days.
Hunter, any thoughts on that from a enterprise security and/or, can this stuff get out of hand from your perspective? I know that a lot of your investments are around enablement, right?
Yeah, it can definitely get out of hand. I think the security piece in particular, we're seeing fairly binary approaches to generative AI right now across the corporate landscape. I think particularly the large banks, the large insurance companies, anybody operating in a heavily or decently regulated industry is politely declining use of generative AI because of the exposure to large language models and a desire to keep their data behind a firewall or within, if they're an on-prem shop still, which many banks still are, surprisingly, they're just opting out. So I think that as that starts to change, potentially with Azure being kind of the large corporate at the forefront of trying to create an enterprise secure instance of OpenAI, I think we'll start to see some things shift in terms of enterprise adoption and security. The governance piece is a whole separate ballgame, partly because the US is so far behind the rest of the world, namely Europe, in terms of AI governance. I think we are in the very early innings of how large US companies or even small US companies are going to have to treat AI. That's a whole other category where I think there will be a suite of tools. We've started to invest in some that explicitly focus on helping companies stay in compliance with their local, state or federal level governance requirements in terms of their use of AI internally, particularly in the e-com context. I think price discrimination will continue to come under scrutiny. Product availability, as you talk about mass consumerization, while it sounds innocent in theory, there are inevitably going to be discrimination lawsuits that come up based on a product being offered to somebody or being offered to somebody and not being offered to another, based simply on an algorithm. So I think that is the Wild West right now in terms of how all this shakes out from a governance standpoint.
Kara, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having somebody who's really looking at all the compliance issues, and to Hunter's point, GDPR really, woke us all up many years ago, and I think that is coming, right? It's coming, guys. So, and I think the other piece is, we were talking a little bit about data and protection of your data lake. So what is it that I'm allowing out there, and what are the things that really need to be proprietary and kept in-house? I think that privacy of our data as well as our customers is incredibly important. And anoint somebody on your team, obviously, who has the technical skills to really think about this and dig in. I had a wonderful gentleman who had incredible curiosity and protected us from a lot of things, who was really in there, understood everything and where that intersection is to test everything.
Interesting stuff. Cap, from your perspective, younger people in marketing, because I know we have a lot of younger folks on the call and younger people as a part of the AMA. Who are looking to grow their marketing careers. Now that generative AI is writing copy, it's creating images, it's even writing code.
Yep.
So what kinds of skill sets, as an engineer yourself, how do you see skills training changing, and what, if you're a young person, do you focus on?
Yeah, I do think it's essentially we describe it as it's a co-pilot. So it's not,
Right.
the technology is not an autopilot. So it's
Right.
co-pilot, therefore there's a human that's always involved. So, for folks that are just starting off in marketing, they have this incredibly powerful co-pilot that they can use with all the caveats that Kara and Hunter pointed, like be sure this data isn't going somewhere you don't want it to, you're not taking anything that you shouldn't be taking, etc. Right? And I would say, like, whereas previously, even within marketing, you would focus on one particular area, right? Maybe you're in like the creative asset management, or maybe you're in campaign management, or maybe you're in like A/B testing and so on. Now, this is because this technology, this assistive co-pilot, generative AI technology is so powerful, you can actually blossom into a couple or even, additional roles as well, right? So whereas you had to like rely on somebody to generate content, here you can give it a prompt and it'll actually generate, an image for you that's hyper personalized, right? It'll generate even music for that image or a video that you want to convert this into. And you can also experiment. You can say, hey, give me 3 different kinds of campaigns that I should try to run, right? Or give me 3 different campaigns for 4 different countries for 5 different seasons. So a single marketeer can now essentially wear several different hats and try out different things. And then to a point that was made earlier around the analytical power, that the platform has, you can now give it all this data, and whereas you had to rely on going to someone in IT and look at all your campaigns and how they've done and click-through rates and CPCs and so on, now you can just ask questions. You can ask, questions, and you can even ask it to give you insights, right? And so therefore you can also become extremely analytical using Copilot. So I would say, start dipping your toes with this technology and play. You can actually even ask it to generate code, and I've seen, actually, I happen to know a couple of marketers that are just starting off, and they're like, hey, can I write some code using it? They're like, absolutely, try it out. So that's, I think, in general advice that I would give to marketers just starting off.
So what does that mean, Kara, from a craft skill standpoint? Does that mean we're all going to become jack of all trades, master of none, and we're not going to have individual craft skills? Like I have 2 journalism degrees. I was a copywriter from the time I was right out of college. If I'm a coder or an art director or a designer, is it just, I'm a co-pilot now? I'm the pilot and my co-pilot. I don't have to have a craft skill anymore. What do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be a bit of both, quite frankly. I don't think that's going to go away, right? Like, we have to be, as Cap was saying, it's a co-pilot. But I think what's interesting about this, and I was at a dinner about a month ago in San Francisco, hosted about 12, SVP, CMO level marketers, and we were told we're the last of the generalist marketers out there. There are not generalist marketers anymore. So I think it's going to be a swing back a little bit, Alan, to there's a lot more tools in our toolbox from when I started. We didn't have as many tools. We have a lot more now. So we need to understand them and become generalist market and think about where the levers are. Now, for smaller companies, you can do that and you may not have that cross. But for those of us who want to move into those other organizations, I think the skills that we all need to have are the same as they've really always been. It's just learning the tools. It's curiosity. All this stuff that we're talking about. If you're putting your head in the sand and going, oh, I'm going to be, the digital designer, I don't need to know anything about that, then I think the world needs to change from that perspective. Understanding data and analysis. And I say those very distinctly because you need people who are doing both. This is going to provide some of the analysis, but our generalist marketing and e-commerce brains need to be on at all times to go, does that make sense? What else do I need to know? It's just going to be a lot faster. Brand stewardship. I would encourage everybody to think about, what does that really mean now? How do we create brands? How do we drive that? We can put a creative brief into it and say, hey, code me up a homepage for this blah, blah, blah thing. I was doing it the other day just for fun. And I'm like, whoa, wow, that was terrifying. That was fast, which is great. But, the brief matters. It always has. And there's not somebody who's generating that for us. And I go back to customer experience, customer at the focus of all of this. What does this mean for the customer at the end of the day? So a little bit of both, where you need to wear all the hats, and then you can specialize. There is still going to be a need, right?
So, but it sounds like you're going to need to be pretty left brain, right brain, right? Because it's going to have to be both.
Yeah.
And it's not just the science of marketing that we need to understand, but the human side is ultimately, we hope, going to still be important. Or at least I hope so. Hunter, from your perspective, and I'd love to just ask you, taking a step back and talking about automation for a second, because if we automate everything, including code, and we're sort of the pilots and the AI is the co-pilot. Beyond just generative AI, I mean, AI is sort of in the spotlight right now. AI, ML, and RPA. Automation is a much bigger topic than that, though, isn't it?
It is. I think we oftentimes use them interchangeably. I think most people kind of in the VC ecosystem would say that automation was somewhat of the precursor or forerunner to what is true AI today. Specifically, RPA, I think, was in vogue from an investment standpoint and an adoption standpoint a few years before more innovative AI companies were. Automation, I think, as a topic or as a concept, is likely to increase. It is increasing. I think it is inevitable that many of our day-to-day tasks will be automated. And I think the reason that that is exciting right now is because automation has shifted from where it was 10 years ago, which was automating repetitive tasks or automating simple tasks, to now we have automation capabilities, many of which are generative AI, by the way, in terms of their technical architecture using transformers, as Cap was referring to earlier. But the automation has reasoning to it, and it has the ability to take action and to create content, as opposed to simply automating some level of inputs or automating some level of process and then giving it back to the human to take action. I think that's really where, in many functions, including marketing, we're going to have an exciting next few years, because we're going to start to be able to have bots, is the most commonly accepted term, but bots, AI assistants, co-pilots, pilots, if you want to call them that right, actually do part of our jobs for us instead of recommending what we should do. And I think that's a part of automation that is, it is part of AI. It is not only AI, but that's a whole different topic in terms of defining subcategories of technology. So,
yeah, Cap, any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's also generative AI is going to move into other spaces as well, right? So, for instance, we were talking to like a top 10 food and beverage company in the world.
Yeah.
And as they get more, previously they would supply to like the large stores, and it was more of a wholesale model.
Well,
and now as they go more into D2C,
and got it. We're separate. Sounds like, well, you guys are the key players on that conversation anyhow. So I want to make sure you got
somebody. It's got to be muted.
Okay, I'm not the full kid.
Ruth, are you there?
Whoops, hold on.
All right.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Hi. Is there something? I'm sorry.
Someone. It looks like someone was unmuted.
I didn't unmute. No, somebody's unmuted. I'm sorry. I don't see anybody unmuted.
I think we're okay now. I think we're sorry, Cap. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
Apologies.
So yeah, large Fortune 50 company we were talking to, and they want to get more into D2C and have started that,
right,
obviously at the marketing and campaign model, but they wanted it even in their warehouses. Now they were like, hey, we need our robots to be able to pick not just pallet, but individual items, because an order has come in for, one box of rice, not 12, and so on.
Right.
And so how do we bring this next generation AI back into like the full supply chain as well, right? So I think it's going to creep into other areas beyond just language, chat, and generating images and content, right? I think as the metaverse and that takes off, now that Apple is coming out with something, and maybe that'll take off, and that whole virtual try-ons, virtual spaces combined with generative AI could take off, similar to kind of robots in your warehouses, etc., for D2C kinds of scenarios, right?
Cool. Oh, I thank you, Cap, for that. I want to bring it back to e-commerce for a second. And Kara, let's talk about brand protection. You talked about trying on a virtual gown when we were prepping for the call virtually. What is this going to mean as some of these, faster fashion and just faster capabilities going to mean to brand protection? And are we going to be able to use this as predictive algorithms to tell us what will sell based on trending, anything trending? How is that going to, enable us to be way more agile?
Absolutely. As I was thinking about this yesterday, the whole idea of putting together a dashboard of lead indicators, which I've always found to be so hard, right, guys? Like it's one of the hardest things ever. It's too late when I find out that traffic's down or sales are down or this isn't working or whatever. I think that this is going to change that. And I was talking to a former colleague as well, who was talking about that upstream piece and that marriage with the retail, with bricks and mortars. So, what is moving there? What is the re-merchandising of that retail store based on some of these learnings in real time? And then how that they may know about it before the e-com side and e-com may know about it before them. So I think that marriage is going to be really important. Back to your point on brands. So I was trying on some virtual try-on tools, John Lewis, equivalent of Rent the Runway last night, and trying on a bunch of ball gowns, which I posted, and my friends were like, "You look fabulous. Where are you going?" And I'm like, "It's not me, you guys." Okay. But for fast fashion, for any fashion, any apparel, or anything really, to me, and I've worked for a lot of big brands, and I've worked for some small startups, and how hard it is to create a brand. I'm not going to make that purchase unless I know it's a trustworthy brand. So I can try it on. It can be the perfect thing for me, and I'm sure everybody on this call has had that experience, that fabulous Instagram ad that looks oh so beautiful and was too good to be true. And I've received that product, and it was too good to be true. And now I'm sitting here with this thing. So brands continue to matter from that. I think it just allows us to move faster and smarter and really understand what the customer wants. And like I said, hopefully we can all figure out ways to learn about these things ahead of time. That balanced scorecard approach where I keep trying to drill in. Okay, what are the lead indicators? How do we know what the customer file is going to look like next month? I think this is going to allow us to finally really do that in a significant way.
Cool. Well, so we have about 10 minutes left. I'd love to open it up. If you have a question, go ahead and pop it in the chat. Kara, one follow-up for you on that. Brand protection with deepfakes. Let's just think for a minute. If you're Chanel, if you're any luxury brand and you've already got problems with knockoffs out in the real world, what is generative AI going to do? How are you going to protect your brand in that environment?
I'm hoping Hunter or Cap can help me figure that out, because other than watermarking, and even then not successfully, because I've certainly had assets stolen by some other marketplaces, countries, manufacturers, and so forth in various places I've been. But I'd love to hear how those guys are thinking about it.
Hunter, any thoughts on that?
I think deepfakes are an enormous problem that no one has a great answer to yet. We've been talking to some companies that have interesting approaches. I don't know whether they'll be right or wrong. One of the maybe ironic pieces of the rise of generative AI is that it might finally be the most appropriate use case for blockchain that has already had its moment in the VC sun, because actually tokenizing and or chaining on an actual blockchain or distributed ledger, marketing content or digital products is probably, as it currently stands, the best encryption tool you can have for verifying authenticity of things. So I think it's still early days. I haven't seen something where I'm like, that is the solution. Also, to be fair, quantum might come in and totally wreck all of those encryption methodologies. So that's another topic for 5 years from now.
Yeah. Is it 5 years, or if we follow the money, it seems to be a whole lot of money pouring into quantum right now, right?
There is a lot of money pouring in. There's a big physics and superconductor innovation that was announced and is kind of being hotly debated right now that might have a big say as to whether that's 5 years from now or 5 months from now. But I think we've got plenty to pay attention to from an innovation standpoint, just sticking to the AI front.
Exactly. Cap, thoughts on brand protection?
Sure, yeah, I think both brand and the legal we talked about, right? My professor at Columbia used to say technology sprawls and law crawls, right? So whether it's the law piece
Technology
or
sprawls and law crawls. That's
yeah, because like we're trying to figure out, for instance, in the U.S. and the Congress, what do we do with this new technology? What kind of laws do we have, ethical concerns? And I think the brand protection and fake images and fake videos is kind of around that same, right? Like by the time we see all these guardrails to protect you from that, it might be a while, right? Hopefully it's sooner than later. I do think what Hunter touched on is key. We are seeing customers ask us, and we do have like a tokenization platform based on blockchain, and they're actually asking us to protect, tokens, and these could be like images, videos, etc., so that you can actually be sure that these are real, right? Sort of an interesting anecdote that does come to mind. An employee was asked to write their yearly annual kind of performance report, and they gave the chatbot like 3 lines and said, convert this into 3 pages, and they send it up to their manager, and their manager says, can you summarize these 3 pages into into a paragraph, right? And so I could see like a startup maybe coming up with, hey, give me a personal co-pilot so that I can tell whether what's being marketed to me is actually a deep fake or real. It might be an interesting sort of use of technology where we each have this, co-pilot that's guiding us as we deal with marketers, both good and fake ones, pushing things to us, right?
very interesting. Yeah. So we've got about 5 minutes left. I'd love to just get one last go round from each of you and just ask, what do you think the next big trend in e-commerce is going to be? Let's start with you, Kara.
Oh gosh, excuse me. I'm hopeful that the next big trend will be marrying all of this to optimize mobile conversion, understanding and flagging friction points in that path, that shop path and checkout process earlier. I think that's the nut that we haven't cracked in a big way, and so much has moved to mobile commerce that I'm hoping bringing all these things together will allow us to be there. The second piece I think this enables, and I think we were talking about this a little bit from what we were talking about before, is it'll enable companies who may be domestic based to go global much faster, where we didn't have the teams previously, and we've got to make sure that the logistics pieces are keeping up with us and all of that, because I think this enables a lot more markets for us around the world in certainly a faster and more efficient way than I just went through the past 10 years.
That's great. Well, thanks for that very, very specific solve that we need to get to, because I know attribution models abound, right? But at the end of the day, how do you really know, right? What's responsible for it? And hopefully some of this will, catalyze, the ability to really help mobile commerce really accelerate the way it has in Asia, right? The way it has in Asia, for sure. How about you, Hunter?
It's a big concept, but I think my vision for the next, call it 5 to 10 years for e-commerce and for brands, and I think Cap referenced it earlier, it might have been Kara, is going to be setting a very high-level strategic vision for your brand guidelines, for your go-to-market strategy, for your products, and effectively allowing a one-to-many strategy whereby you go into different markets, to Kara's point, and it does all the translation of copy for you. It does tweaking of product design for you such that it fits demographic trends in different countries. Also, adhering to your brand guidelines. But I think e-com as a whole will become very, very strategic, and the execution of how it all happens will be heavily automated, to the automation question earlier. And I think that's true of the mobile piece in particular. I think you will set one set of standards and approaches to marketing as a whole, and how that gets translated into your mobile strategy versus your brick and mortar strategy versus your out of home strategy is largely going to be done for you. Again, it's a big concept, but I think to the point earlier of how you should be thinking about a marketing career, I think the translation of what customers want and what customer experience you're striving for as an organization should remain the priority. I think a lot of the execution stuff is going to be taken care of, frankly, by technology, or at least will be heavily taken care of in a co-pilot fashion.
Excellent. I think that is a big idea. The question is, can we all be that strategic as opposed to executional? Cap, what do you think?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I agree. I think in terms of where this field is going with what Kara and Hunter mentions, I'll just take a more technology-oriented approach to the answer as well. I do think the plumbing will be where it's more customized per marketer, per company, et cetera, right? So today we're using sort of this generative pre-trained generic transformer GPT, but there's already different models that are best at different tasks, right? So for instance, around the medical field, the Google has like a medical POM, MedPOM, it's called, model that's reportedly #1 in that task. There's several other open source models that are best at other tasks like math and so on. And so you can imagine that, every marketing organization, whether it's like Williams-Sonoma or others, they will have their own models, and each of their models might also be very specific to a particular area, right? What they might have for, coffee makers might be different than what they have for baking goods versus others.
Right.
And so it'll be the sort of infrastructure that's provided to each of the marketeers will be much more powerful than anything that they have today, and much more sort of personalized and customized to that company as well. And then you can mix and match that with your customer audience, so you get that hyper focus on like the customer, as Kara has pointed out so correctly.
Well, it's gonna be interesting to see, right? It's gonna be really interesting to see what transpires. For those of you, first of all, I want to say thank you to the panelists. This has been a really interesting discussion. I think by September, when we do the next one of these e-commerce, catalysts for e-commerce, I think we're going to have some new cases and use cases to talk about, because stuff is moving so fast. So really want to say thank you to all of you for lending your points of view, both from a venture capital and engineering, and Kara from you as a longtime practitioner in e-commerce. Want to thank you all for your time on behalf of the AMA New York. Really appreciate your willingness to join us here. And I hope all of you that dialed in enjoyed it and will join us next time in September when we present the second one of this signature series, Catalyst for E-commerce. Want to also thank our sponsor, Channable, for making this possible. And thanks for your points of view. It's going to be interesting to see where we go, and appreciate all your points of view and you joining us. And with that, I'll say have a great afternoon, everyone, or evening, or lunch, and appreciate you joining this webinar from the AMA New York. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. See you.